Is that not the president?
Ex-husband brings mistress to reunion to shame ex-wife, but she arrived with the president. Esteemed viewers, welcome to Luxurious True Life Stories. Please like and subscribe for more captivating luxury true stories. Let's get into the story. Ruth Tyler grew up in a quiet town with her widowed mother, Margaret Tyler. Their small house was simple, and life was often difficult, but Margaret raised Ruth with kindness, discipline, and strong values. Margaret worked long hours as a nurse, while Ruth focused on her studies and helped around the house. Despite their struggles, Ruth remained calm, intelligent, and compassionate. Ruth loved reading and writing. She spent many afternoons in the town library, fascinated by stories and human emotions. While other young people chased popularity and excitement, Ruth preferred peaceful spaces where she could think and dream. Her dream was to become a writer and share meaningful stories with the world. As Ruth prepared for university, she believed her life would follow a quiet and honest path. She had no idea that soon she would meet someone who would completely change her life, someone whose ambition and pride would eventually lead her into heartbreak, humiliation, and an unexpected future she could never have imagined. When Ruth arrived at university, everything felt new and overwhelming. The campus was large, lively, and filled with students from wealthy and powerful families. Ruth remained focused on her studies and avoided unnecessary attention. One afternoon, during a university charity event organized by the literature department, she met Joseph Reed. Joseph was confident, charming, and known among students for his intelligence and ambition. Joseph immediately noticed Ruth's calm nature and quiet beauty. Unlike the other students who tried to impress him, Ruth spoke naturally and treated him like any other person. Their conversation that afternoon lasted much longer than expected. They discussed books, future dreams, and the different worlds they both came from. Joseph found her sincerity refreshing, while Ruth admired his determination and confidence. Over the next few weeks, Joseph began spending more time with Ruth. He invited her to campus cafes, study sessions, and evening walks around the university garden. Many students were surprised by the pair because Joseph usually surrounded himself with wealthy social circles. Ruth slowly began to trust him, unaware that Joseph's ambition and desire for status would one day change everything between them. As months passed, Ruth and Joseph became inseparable on campus. Joseph often admired Ruth's calm mind and gentle way of speaking. While many students competed for attention and status, Ruth remained focused on simple things, her studies, writing, and helping others. Joseph began to feel that Ruth brought peace into his fast and ambitious life. Their relationship quickly became serious, and many of their classmates started seeing them as the perfect couple. Joseph came from a wealthy and influential family. His father, Edward Reed, owned several successful investment companies, and his mother, Lucille Reed, was known for hosting elite social gatherings. Despite their powerful reputation, Joseph rarely spoke about his family in detail. When Ruth finally met them during a formal dinner, she felt nervous but hopeful. Edward observed her quietly while Lucille remained polite but distant, clearly unsure about Ruth's modest background. Not long after graduating, Joseph surprised Ruth with a sudden proposal. He told her he wanted to build his future with her immediately. Ruth, deeply in love and trusting his intentions, accepted without hesitation. Their wedding was elegant but small, attended mostly by Joseph's family and a few university friends. Ruth believed she had found a partner who would walk beside her through every challenge in life. She stepped into marriage with hope, unaware that the life waiting ahead would be far more complicated than she ever imagined. After the wedding, Ruth moved into Joseph's large city home, a place far different from the quiet house she had grown up in. Everything around her felt luxurious: tall glass windows, expensive furniture, and a constant flow of important visitors. Joseph quickly became busy with work at his father's investment company. He spent long hours attending meetings and corporate events, determined to prove himself successful in the business world. Ruth tried her best to adjust to this new environment. She attended dinners with Joseph's colleagues and greeted guests politely, though many of them quietly judged her simple background. Joseph's mother, Lucille, often corrected Ruth's manners and clothing choices, insisting she must fit the image of the Reed family. Ruth listened patiently and tried to learn, believing supporting her husband was part of her new life. Despite the luxury around her, Ruth sometimes felt lonely. Joseph became increasingly focused on building his reputation and rarely noticed how quiet she had become. To keep herself busy, Ruth volunteered at a nearby community center and continued writing in her journals late at night. She still believed their marriage would grow stronger with time, not realizing that Joseph's ambition was slowly pulling him further away from her. Joseph's career began to rise quickly inside his father's company. With every successful project, his confidence grew stronger, and he started attending more high-level corporate meetings and private networking events. During one of these meetings, a new strategist joined the company, Benita Nathan. She was elegant, confident, and known for her sharp business mind. Benita understood how the corporate world worked and how powerful connections could change a person's future. Benita immediately noticed Joseph. His ambition, family background, and growing reputation made him someone worth paying attention to. During meetings, she often sat close to him, offering ideas and compliments that slowly built a sense of closeness between them. Joseph enjoyed the attention and admired Benita's confidence and bold personality. Their conversations soon extended beyond the office into late evening discussions about business strategies and future opportunities. Meanwhile, Ruth remained unaware of the growing connection between them. She continued focusing on volunteering and writing, believing Joseph's long working hours were simply part of his career growth. However, small changes in Joseph's behavior began to appear. He returned home later than usual, spoke less during dinner, and often seemed distracted. Ruth noticed the distance, but trusted her husband too much to imagine that someone else had begun entering their marriage. As weeks passed, Joseph's connection with Benita grew stronger. Their meetings became more frequent, and many of their discussions continued outside the office. Joseph admired Benita's confidence and the way she understood the competitive world he was trying to conquer. Around her, he felt encouraged to chase bigger ambitions and social influence. At home, the atmosphere between Joseph and Ruth slowly changed. Joseph began returning late at night, often claiming he had important business meetings. Ruth tried to remain supportive, preparing dinners and asking about his day, but Joseph's responses became shorter and colder. The warmth that once existed between them was slowly fading. Ruth felt the distance, but believed stress from work was the cause. One evening at a corporate dinner, Ruth attended alongside Joseph for the first time in weeks. It was there that she met Benita Nathan. Benita greeted her with a polite smile, but there was something unsettling in the way she looked at Ruth. Throughout the evening, Ruth noticed how comfortably Benita spoke with Joseph, laughing at his jokes and standing close beside him. Though nothing obvious happened, a quiet feeling of unease settled in Ruth's heart. She left the dinner with a strange sense that something in her marriage was beginning to change. The tension between Ruth and Joseph continued to grow. Joseph spent more time away from home, and when he was present, his patience seemed gone. Conversations that once felt warm now ended quickly or turned into quiet arguments. Ruth tried to repair the distance between them, suggesting they spend time together like they used to, but Joseph always claimed he was too busy with important responsibilities. One evening, Joseph returned home earlier than usual. His expression was cold and serious. Ruth felt nervous as he asked her to sit down because he needed to speak with her. Without hesitation, Joseph told her their marriage was no longer working. He said their lives were moving in different directions and that she no longer fit the future he wanted to build. His words were sharp and distant, leaving no space for discussion. Soon the truth became clear. Joseph admitted he had grown close to Benita Nathan and planned to continue his life with her. Ruth sat silently, shocked by how quickly everything had changed. The divorce process moved quickly and without kindness. Joseph showed no regret as he ended their marriage. With a heavy heart but quiet dignity, Ruth packed her belongings and left the luxurious house. She walked away from the life she once believed would last forever, stepping into an uncertain future completely on her own. After leaving Joseph's house, Ruth moved to a different city where no one knew her past. The apartment she found was small but peaceful, located on a quiet street near a public library. For the first few weeks, life felt heavy and unfamiliar. The silence in her new home reminded her that everything she once had was gone. Yet Ruth refused to allow bitterness to control her future. To support herself, Ruth accepted a position at a Cultural Foundation library. The work was simple but meaningful. She organized books, helped visitors find research materials, and sometimes assisted with small literary events. Being surrounded by books again slowly brought back the calm she once felt during her younger years. In the evenings, she returned to writing in her journal, pouring her thoughts onto paper as a way to rebuild her strength. During this time, Ruth also formed new friendships. Emily Grant, a curious journalist who frequently visited the library, admired Ruth's intelligence and encouraged her writing. Another visitor, Daniel Whitmore, a historian researching cultural heritage, often spent hours discussing literature with her. These new connections reminded Ruth that life could still offer kindness and opportunity. Though the pain of her divorce remained, she was slowly rediscovering her confidence and purpose. One evening the Cultural Foundation hosted a small charity event to support educational programs for underprivileged students. The library was decorated with soft lights, books were displayed across long wooden tables, and quiet music filled the hall. Ruth helped organize the event, greeting guests and guiding visitors through the exhibition. She preferred working behind the scenes, avoiding attention while making sure everything ran smoothly. Among the visitors that evening was a calm, well-dressed man who arrived without any security or publicity. His name was Desmond Alex. And like many of the other guests who spoke loudly about their achievements, Desmond moved quietly through the room, carefully observing the exhibits and speaking politely with volunteers. When he approached the information desk, Ruth assisted him in finding a collection of historical books about leadership and social reform. The conversations started simply but lasted longer than expected. Desmond noticed Ruth's thoughtful way of explaining the books and her deep understanding of literature. Ruth, on the other hand, felt comfortable speaking with him because he listened carefully and spoke with kindness. Before leaving the event, Desmond thanked her for the conversation and expressed interest in returning to the foundation again. Ruth watched him leave with curiosity, unaware that this quiet stranger would soon play a very important role in the next chapter of her life. A few days after the charity event, Desmond Alex returned to the Cultural Foundation library. Ruth was arranging books on a large wooden shelf when she noticed him walking in again. He greeted her politely, asking if she could recommend more books similar to the ones they discussed during their last meeting. Ruth smiled and guided him through several sections of the library, explaining the themes and authors she believed he might enjoy. Over the following weeks, Desmond visited the library more frequently. Sometimes he came to read quietly, and other times he asked Ruth for book recommendations. Their conversations gradually grew deeper. They spoke about literature, human struggles, leadership, and the importance of compassion in society. Ruth noticed that Desmond had a calm presence and a thoughtful way of listening, which made it easy for her to speak openly. Although Desmond never spoke much about his personal life, Ruth sensed he carried great responsibility. At the same time, Desmond admired Ruth's strength and dignity despite the hardships she had faced. What began as simple conversations slowly developed into a genuine friendship built on trust and respect. Neither of them realized how important their connection would soon become. One afternoon the library became unusually quiet. Ruth was organizing a stack of returned books when several well-dressed security officers entered the building. They spoke briefly with the foundation manager before stepping aside respectfully near the entrance. Ruth watched with confusion, wondering who they were waiting for. Moments later, Desmond Alex walked through the door calmly, greeting the officers with a small nod before approaching the reading area. Ruth realized immediately that something about the situation was different. Desmond walked toward her as usual and greeted her politely, but the presence of security around him raised questions. Seeing the concern in her eyes, Desmond gently explained the truth he had kept private during their earlier conversations. He told her he was not simply a visitor interested in books, he was the president of the country. He preferred visiting the foundation quietly because it allowed him to observe real community work without attention from the media. Ruth stood still for a moment, surprised by the revelation. She had been speaking with him like an ordinary friend without knowing his true position. However, instead of treating her differently, Desmond assured her that their conversations had been meaningful to him because she spoke honestly without fear or expectation. Ruth slowly relaxed and realized that the man she had been talking with was still the same thoughtful person she had come to know. Their friendship continued, but now she understood that Desmond Alex carried a responsibility far greater than she had ever imagined. After revealing his true identity, Desmond continued visiting the Cultural Foundation whenever his schedule allowed. Despite his position as president, he behaved the same way he always had, calm, respectful, and deeply interested in meaningful conversations. Ruth gradually became comfortable again, realizing that behind the title was simply a thoughtful man who valued honesty and quiet moments away from politics. Their friendship slowly deepened. Sometimes they walked through the foundation garden discussing literature and social change. Other times they shared long conversations about life's struggles and personal dreams. Ruth spoke about her passion for writing and the difficult experience of rebuilding her life after divorce. Desmond listened carefully and admired the strength she had shown during such painful moments. Over time, Desmond found himself drawn to Ruth's sincerity and calm spirit. She was different from the powerful people he usually met in politics. Around her, he felt peace and clarity. Ruth also began to appreciate his kindness and wisdom. What started as a simple friendship slowly began transforming into something deeper, an emotional connection built on trust, respect, and understanding. Neither of them rushed the feeling, but both quietly realized that their lives were beginning to change again. As months passed, the bond between Ruth and Desmond grew deeper and more meaningful. They trusted each other completely and understood each other's struggles. Desmond admired Ruth's calm strength and the way she faced life with dignity despite the pain she had experienced. Ruth, in turn, respected Desmond not for his position, but for his character, kindness, and thoughtful leadership. One evening, during a quiet walk in the foundation garden, Desmond spoke honestly about his feelings. He told Ruth that meeting her had changed the way he looked at life outside politics. With sincerity, he asked if she would consider building a future with him. Ruth was surprised and hesitant at first, knowing his position as president meant living under constant public attention. However, Desmond assured her that what mattered most to him was having a partner who understood him and stood beside him with honesty. After careful thought, Ruth accepted his proposal. To avoid public pressure and unnecessary attention, their marriage was held privately with only a few trusted witnesses present. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. For Ruth, it marked a new chapter of peace and respect after the painful end of her previous marriage. She stepped into this new life quietly, unaware that soon the past she had left behind would unexpectedly cross her path again. While Ruth was quietly building a new life, Joseph Reed's career continued to rise rapidly. His position in the investment company grew stronger, and many people in his social circle admired his success. With Benita Nathan constantly beside him, Joseph attended luxurious parties, business gatherings, and high-profile networking events. Benita encouraged his ambition and often reminded him that power and influence were the most important measures of success. Joseph enjoyed the attention that came with his growing reputation. He often spoke proudly about his achievements and the luxurious lifestyle he had built. In private conversations with friends, he sometimes mentioned Ruth, describing their divorce as a necessary step that allowed him to move forward in life. Benita rarely missed an opportunity to mock Ruth's simple background, reinforcing Joseph's belief that leaving her had been the right decision. Around this time, the university Joseph and Ruth once attended announced a prestigious 10-year alumni reunion gala. The event was expected to gather many successful graduates and influential figures. When Joseph heard the news, he immediately decided to attend with Benita. In his mind, it would be a perfect opportunity to display his success and prove to everyone that his life had become far more impressive since his divorce. What Joseph did not realize was that this reunion would soon lead to a moment he never expected. The announcement of the university reunion quickly spread among former classmates. Invitations were sent to graduates who had once shared classrooms, friendships, and ambitions on the same campus. The event was planned as a grand evening filled with elegant decorations, music, and conversations about how everyone's lives had changed over the years. Many alumni looked forward to seeing old friends again and sharing stories about their journeys. Ruth first heard about the reunion from her old university friend Clara Bennett, who called her with excitement. Clara had remained one of the few people who supported Ruth during her painful divorce. She explained that many of their former classmates would attend and encouraged Ruth to come as well. At first, Ruth hesitated. The thought of seeing Joseph again made her uneasy, and she wondered if attending the reunion might reopen old memories she had worked so hard to move past. Later that evening, Ruth mentioned the reunion to Desmond during dinner. Desmond listened carefully as she explained her concerns. Instead of dismissing her worries, he calmly told her that she had nothing to fear. The past had already passed, and she had every right to walk into that reunion with confidence. His reassuring words helped Ruth feel stronger. Slowly, she began considering the possibility of attending, unaware that the night of the reunion would soon become one of the most unforgettable moments of her life. The evening of the reunion arrived with excitement and anticipation. The grand hall of the university was beautifully decorated with elegant lights, long tables, and soft music playing in the background. Former classmates gathered in groups, laughing and sharing stories about their lives since graduation. Many guests arrived dressed in formal attire, eager to make a strong impression after so many years apart. Joseph Reed arrived confidently with Benita Nathan by his side. Benita wore an expensive gown and carried herself with pride, clearly enjoying the attention from the crowd. Joseph greeted old classmates loudly, speaking about his successful career and the luxurious life he had built. During several conversations, he casually mentioned Ruth, suggesting that their divorce had allowed him to pursue a more successful path. Benita supported his attitude, quietly mocking Ruth whenever her name came up. As the evening continued, Joseph began asking classmates whether Ruth had arrived yet. His tone carried a hint of mockery, as though he expected her to appear alone and embarrassed. Many people remembered Ruth as kind and intelligent, and some felt uncomfortable hearing Joseph speak about her that way. Still, Joseph remained confident, believing that the reunion would be another opportunity to show everyone how far he had risen. What he did not know was that the night was about to take a surprising turn. The reunion hall continued to buzz with conversation when the large entrance doors slowly opened again. At first, only a few people noticed the arrival of new guests. Then the quiet murmurs began spreading across the room as several security officers stepped inside. Conversations faded, and many guests turned their attention toward the entrance with curiosity. Walking calmly through the doorway was President Desmond Alex, dressed in a simple but elegant suit. Beside him walked Ruth Tyler, graceful and confident. She wore a modest yet stunning evening gown that reflected quiet elegance rather than showy luxury. The moment people recognized the president, the entire room fell silent. No one had expected such an arrival at a university reunion. Joseph stood frozen as he watched Ruth enter the hall beside the president. His confident smile disappeared instantly. Benita's expression shifted from pride to disbelief as whispers spread among the guests. Desmond calmly greeted several university officials before gently introducing Ruth as his wife. The revelation sent shock through the room. In a single moment, the plan Joseph had imagined to embarrass Ruth completely collapsed in front of everyone. After the shocking introduction, the reunion hall remained unusually quiet. Guests who had once been chatting loudly now whispered among themselves, trying to understand what had just happened. Many of them remembered Ruth as the kind and humble student from their university days. Seeing her now standing beside the president created a mixture of surprise, admiration, and curiosity throughout the room. Joseph struggled to maintain his composure. Only moments earlier he had been confidently boasting about his success, expecting Ruth to appear weak or absent. Instead, she stood calmly beside one of the most powerful men in the country. Benita's confident smile had completely disappeared. She watched the reactions around the room and realized the attention she once enjoyed had suddenly shifted entirely toward Ruth. Desmond greeted several former professors and university officials politely while Ruth spoke kindly with old classmates who welcomed her warmly. Unlike Joseph's loud display of success earlier in the evening, Ruth carried herself with quiet dignity. Her calm presence spoke louder than any words. For Joseph, the moment felt deeply uncomfortable. The humiliation he had planned for Ruth had now turned against him, and everyone in the room could clearly see it. As the evening continued, many former classmates gathered around Ruth and Desmond with curiosity and admiration. People who once studied with Ruth remembered her kindness and intelligence, and they were genuinely happy to see her doing well. Ruth greeted them warmly, speaking with the same humility she had always carried. Her calm behavior made the moment even more powerful, because she showed no desire to embarrass anyone. Across the hall, Joseph stood quietly with Benita. The pride he had shown earlier had completely faded. Some guests who overheard his earlier comments about Ruth now looked at him with disappointment. It slowly became clear to everyone that Ruth had rebuilt her life with dignity after the divorce. Instead of the humiliation Joseph expected, the reunion had revealed the strength of the woman he once underestimated. Joseph finally approached Ruth, hoping to speak with her briefly. His voice was quieter than usual as he greeted her. Ruth responded politely but without bitterness or anger. She simply treated him as someone from her past. Desmond stood beside her respectfully, saying very little but making it clear that Ruth was valued and respected. In that moment, Joseph realized that the woman he had once dismissed had found a far greater life than he ever imagined. As the reunion slowly came to an end, the atmosphere in the hall became calm again. Guests continued speaking about the surprising events of the evening, but Ruth remained peaceful. She had not come to prove anything to anyone. Simply walking into the room with confidence had already shown how much her life had changed since the painful days of her divorce. Desmond and Ruth quietly said their goodbyes to several classmates and professors before leaving the hall together. Outside, the night air felt cool and peaceful. Ruth looked back at the building where many years earlier she had started her journey as a young student with dreams and hopes. Life had taken her through heartbreak, humiliation, and uncertainty, yet it had also led her toward unexpected strength and happiness. As they walked toward the waiting car, Desmond gently held Ruth's hand. The past no longer had power over her. She had rebuilt her life with dignity, discovered love again, and found a future filled with respect and peace. For Ruth Tyler, the painful chapter with Joseph Reed had finally closed, and a new beginning had quietly begun beside a man who truly valued her. As this story comes to an end, remember that behind every luxury lies a truth few ever see. If this story moved you, support the channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Until the next unforgettable true story, stay inspired and stay curious.